Hello and welcome to the first of 3 videos showing you how to turn a Microsoft Surface tablet, the Go-To model to be more precise, into a fully fledged Linux tablet. In case you're wondering what the channel name means, Frickelfieber, well, it's German. It stands for Tinkering Fever, if I had to translate it literally. So normally I produce my videos in German. This time I want to do it in English as well to address a wider audience. Because I didn't find much about this topic on YouTube, so I thought it might be a good idea to talk about this. In the first video, I'm going to show you how to install the system and how to set it up properly to have a fully working tablet. And there is an additional step in video number 2, so you'll be able to run Android apps on it. Yes, you heard correctly, that's possible. We need to use Waydroid in order to do that. And in the background, you can actually see a few screenshots I took earlier on, playing a game and showing the system a little bit. And in the third video, we'll talk about fine-tuning the system, because my tablet here, the Go-To, is a low-spec device, so we need to fine-tune the system to squeeze every last bit of performance out of it. So before we start, I'd like to draw your attention to the video description. You'll find all the terminal commands down there, and also the video chapters and the links to the relevant websites. Right, let's get cracking and let's install Ubuntu, or a Linux distribution, on the tablet itself. But before we do that, let's have a look at the specifications, because they influence the choice of the distribution and the desktop environment. So we're dealing with a low-spec device here, 64 gigabytes of disk space, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and that's a bit of a problem. And also just a very, very humble processor. So dual-core Intel Pentium processor, 1.7 gigahertz. So that it's nothing to write home about, and we need to keep that in mind when setting it up correctly. Why did you buy it though, looking at the specifications? Well, first and foremost, data security and privacy are important to me. I've been using Linux for more than 15 years on my computers. On my smartphone, I'm using Graphene OS. I realized that I had a chink in my armor though, because to watch the telly and stream some videos, I'd been using my Android tablet for some time before I bought the Go-To tablet. I know it's ironic, so if you want to get Linux on a tablet to get rid of Microsoft or Android, you need to buy a Microsoft device, because it's easy, especially for the Go-To. I mean, it's easy to install Linux and it almost works out of the box, as I'll show you later on. Second reason, I didn't want to spend too much money, so I paid 200 euros for the tablet here, for the Go-To. Apparently, it has been returned by the previous owner after a very short amount of time. I haven't found any scratches or anything like that yet, so it looks like a brand new device to me. I can imagine why the guy returned it though. I mean, using Windows 10 on such a device, that it surely must be a nightmare. With that being said, time to start the installation of the system. What do you need? Well, obviously you need a Microsoft Surface tablet. So this tutorial is designed for the Go-To tablet, but it should work for the other tablets as well. The older the tablet, the higher the chances are that it works out of the box. Secondly, you need a bootable USB-C stick. Well, I didn't have one lying around, so I had to fall back on a USB-C adapter. And I even connected a USB hub to the adapter, and I attached my physical mouse and a physical keyboard to the hub. It worked without any problems. So that might work for you as well, but it's best to use a proper USB-C stick. So, creating a bootable USB stick obviously means choosing a Linux distro first. Well, we need to talk about that right now, because normally we're spoiled for choice. I mean, you can choose a distro, you can choose a desktop environment that suits your needs, but in this case, the choices are really, really restricted, and I'll tell you why. First of all, if you want to have a proper tablet experience, you need a very good virtual keyboard. And there is just one desktop environment offering this, and that's Gnome. So we need to use a distro supporting Gnome. Secondly, if you want to install Android apps later on, you need to be able to run Waydroid. And Waydroid relies on Wayland, the Wayland compositor. So we need a desktop environment playing nicely along with Wayland. And again, the answer here, Gnome. And the third factor speaks in favor of using Ubuntu as a basis, because it also has to do with Waydroid. So I set up Waydroid on other systems, so on Manjaro Linux as well, and it's a bit more difficult. So I want to keep things simple in this tutorial, so I decided to use Ubuntu. It's really easy to set up Waydroid. And Ubuntu and Gnome, well, that means let's just use standard Ubuntu, and during the installation you can choose a minimal installation. That is what I did. So, and I suggest doing this as well. Now, before we can enjoy Linux, we need to spend some time in the Windows operating system. Well, it's unavoidable. So first of all, you need to boot Windows, the original Windows, and you need to update the whole system. The reason being that you need to update the firmware to the latest version. You could do this theoretically later on, but it's easiest to do it in Windows. So first of all, boot into Windows, update the whole system. You know how this works. It's not difficult. It's just going to take a bit of time. Once this has been finished, we need to shut down the computer. So you just do that. You shut down the computer. And once it has been shut down, you need to restart it, but not in the normal way. So you need to press the volume up button and the power button at the same time. And as soon as you can see the Windows logo popping up, you can release the power button, and then it will boot into the BIOS. And in the BIOS, you need to change a few things. You need to disable secure boot. You can see a screenshot here. It might not be necessary on the Go 2 device, but just to make assurance doubly sure, just disable secure boot. And then you need to change another setting. You need to change the order of the boot devices, and just make sure that the USB device is in first place. You can see a screenshot here. So we really need to do that. Once you're done with that, you restart the device again. Don't forget to plug in your USB key, and theoretically, because the BIOS has been set up correctly, it should boot from the stick. Well, I can promise you it won't. Well, it's not a promise, really. Well, it's sad to say this, but it won't. There's a problem with the Go 2. You'll end up, well, most likely, you'll end up in Windows once again. But not to worry, there's a solution. If you end up in Windows, you need to go to the Settings app. And once you're there, you have to choose Update and Security, then Recovery. And in the recovery settings, you can choose advanced settings. Once you're there, you choose the USB drive, and you'll see something along the lines of using Limpus Lite, which is Linux in this case, even though your distribution is not called Limpus Lite. So you can boot it from there and just do this. So it'll reboot the system, and you'll end up in your Ubuntu installation. So that is a solution here. But you might imagine that there are long-term implications. I mean, if you're not able to boot from a stick, even though everything has been set up correctly, there's something going completely wrong. And that means that in the future, if you want to use a different Linux distribution, you'll have to install Windows first. It's a very sad state of affairs, and I can really feel evil company vibes here. So I searched around on the web. No one has found a solution yet. Apparently, maybe using a proper USB stick might solve the problem. I don't know. I can't check it. I don't have one here. So that just means choosing the correct distro is very, very important to start with. If you're watching this, I suppose you're familiar with installing Ubuntu on a device, so I don't have to talk about the installation itself. I mean, it's quite obvious, self-explanatory. You just follow the instructions, and you'll end up in a working system, and everything works pretty much out of the box except for the cameras. But there's a solution as well. I'll show you later. Now, first of all, we need to make sure that we improve the virtual keyboard a little bit, and we need to install a few things. If you're familiar with Gnome, you might know this too. Let's update the system first. You know how this works. It's just sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. You can find all the terminal commands in the video description, by the way, in the right order of appearance. So let's update the system, and once this has been done, we need to install a few things. And I do this using the terminal window. For me, that's far faster. So we need to install the Gnome shell extensions and also Gnome tweaks. There's a third thing you might want to install. I did this. That's the dconf editor. These things allow you to properly set up Gnome and to fine-tune things a little bit. But the most important bit here, we want to improve the virtual keyboard's functionality. So you install the extensions, the tweaks, and the editor if you want to. So after the installation, let's have a look at the extensions. So you can click on extensions and you'll see a screen. Well, obviously I've already installed a few extensions, and you can see them there, manually installed. Normally, if you're using the standard Ubuntu version of Gnome, it might look a bit different here, if I remember correctly. So extensions needs to be enabled. That's the same thing. But then there is you have the option of going to the internet immediately. I think I don't have this here. So you can search the Gnome website for extensions from within the app. I can't do it here, so it's far easier for you to install it. You need the improved OSK. So this will allow you to install an improved version of the virtual keyboard. So you'll have all the keys necessary, the Alt key, the Control key, all the function keys, everything you need. Otherwise, the standard keyboard doesn't offer that. And there is an option, so I'll just go down a little and enter the settings. And in the settings, make sure that you tick the option Show OSK Toggle in Status Bar. So that's really important, because some apps, they don't play along well with the virtual keyboard. So if you want to type in text, they don't trigger the keyboard, so the keyboard doesn't pop up. In that case, you can start it manually from the toggle. It happens from time to time. It's not a big deal, but I think that's the most important thing here to improve the functionality of the keyboard. Second thing, if you're running the standard Ubuntu Gnome desktop, you won't have to do that, but I had to install this. So in order to be able to start apps conveniently, you need dash to dock. Without it, using Gnome is a nightmare. So dash to dock needs to be installed. If you haven't installed it yet, it's time to do this now. You can enter the settings and choose a few things. I'm not going to enter the details. It's self-explanatory once again. These two extensions are essential. So once you have them installed, you have a working tablet. So if you want to, you can stop here. There are a few things we need to check. I'll go into a few more details though. In order to do that, let's just go into the tweaks section here. So you can search for tweaks and you start the tweaks. I'll go through the different settings quickly. So general, I didn't change anything, I believe. Appearance, well, if you want to, you can install different themes, you can install different icons. That's what I did. But it's up to you to decide. If you want to stick with the standard Ubuntu settings, that's okay. That's true for the fonts, that's true for keyboard and mouse. Startup applications, make sure you don't have too much going on there. The top bar, if you want to change things, up to you to do this. Now, this is way more important. The window title bars. This is something that you might want to change because the Ubuntu Gnome desktop comes with just the closing button, I think. So there is no maximize, no minimize. You can switch it on here. You can even change the placement of these buttons. So that's what I did. I activated maximize and minimize. Let's go through the settings as well to make sure that everything has been set up correctly. So these are the standard settings. So Wi-Fi, it's okay, network, okay, Bluetooth. Yes, Bluetooth here, make sure that Bluetooth works for you. It didn't work for me correctly when I installed the system. I don't know why that's happened. I started tinkering with kernel parameters quite early on, so it might have to do with that. And that's why I had to to install a different kernel. I come back to that later. If you have this problem, keep on watching. I'll show you the solution later on, but let's just stay here for the moment. So background, you can choose the background you want to. Notifications, I switched it off. And now this is important, search. So remember, we're using a low spec device, and the search function can slow down the system. So I tried to choose the right settings for my device. So I didn't want to do too much here. So I tried to switch off the functions I don't need in order to make the system run more smoothly. So I deactivated search. So if you want to do that, you can do that. Multitasking, there are hot corners also. These are functions I never need. I switched off everything I don't need. I limited the number of workspaces. I just need one, but it depends on your needs. So I can't tell you what to do. Now, you know this from other operating systems. You can choose which app can send you notifications. Now the security settings, there are a few things you might want to change, but it's up to you. So I decided not to send any data. So privacy settings here, I decided not to send any data to Ubuntu. So diagnostics, I turned it off. But again, up to you to decide what to do. And I think the rest, yeah, there's just the power stuff important here. I had a few problems with the automatic screen brightness, so I turned this off. I do this manually. And as for the rest, again, it's up to you to decide which settings you prefer and what you're used to doing. What else is there? The screen display. Yes, that's very important. So it's a 10-inch screen, and I'm using fractional scaling here with 175%. It works best for me, it looks best, but again, there is this warning here. It may increase power usage, lower speed. I might play around with this and to find out whether it might be better to change this. Well, it's a bit of a trade-off, okay? It looks good, but maybe it slows things down too much. I'll see. But you can play around with these settings. Mouse, keyboard, nothing to say there. And that's about it. So now, if everything is working fine, if the Bluetooth connection works correctly, and if you're using a Go-To tablet, you could say, well, enough for me, I'm fine with that. So you could stop here actually. If you're using a newer version, a newer Surface, I highly recommend installing a repository offering different kernel versions, which include the newest drivers you need to support your hardware. In order to do that, you need to use the terminal window again. I'll show you the commands. You can find them in the video description first, and I'll just shortly explain what they mean. I'm not going to go through all the steps because I've done that already. So first of all, you need to activate the repo and to install an app which allows you to add the repo. They use xrepo here. And then after that, you install the repo and you do an update of the system. Once this has been done, you need to install the Linux image. So that's the Linux image surface, the headers, and all that kind of stuff. Once this has been done, there is an optional step. If you want to use secure boot, I re-enabled it after installing Ubuntu. It works, so you can sign the key so that you have a secure boot. So if you want to do that, you have to install the Linux Surface Secure Boot MOK. And once this has been installed, it will reboot the system and you'll end up in the blue screen after the reboot, and you have to confirm everything there. Yes, 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 yes. And once you end up in Linux, once again, you have to do a sudo update grub to update the bootloader. So this step is optional for grub2 users. Normally everything should work out of the box except for the camera. On the other devices, you need to do that. Then there is one more thing I highly recommend. Ubuntu comes with the Firefox web browser pre-installed, but it's a special kind of version. You might know that. So Ubuntu, so Canonical, the company behind it, they've been pushing their version of Linux apps, so the Snap apps, in recent years. So Firefox comes in the form of a Snap app, and that's a bit of a problem when you have a low-spec device, because it eats up system resources. So I suggest getting rid of snapd altogether, and we need to find a way of getting Firefox from a different source. It's not a problem. There is a Firefox repository, an official Mozilla Firefox repository. So there are a few things we need to do. So let's disable the snapd service. The 3 first commands just do that. So system control, disable the different services. And then you need to have a look which apps have been installed by Snap. That's what the command sudo snap list is for. You need to remove the Snap Firefox version. You need to remove the Snap Store. If there are more apps, which shouldn't be the case because you've just installed the system, you need to get rid of these as well with snap, remove, and then the name of the app. Once this has been done, let's get rid of snapd altogether. So that's the auto remove option here with purge snapd, and we need to do some cleaning up after that. So that's why we need to remove the snapd cache and everything related with Snap, so the configuration data. Now, if we want to be able to install the normal deb version, we need to make sure that when we update the system, that the system looks in the right place. So Ubuntu would still look for the Snap update. So we need to prevent Ubuntu from doing that. Or we need to, well, it's apt, it's apt which is doing this. So we need to create a few apt preferences. So you create a file which is called Firefox No Snap, and in this file you need to type the stuff you can see here. Again, you can find this in the video description. We need to pin this particular app to change the priority so that the version from the Mozilla repository gets the priority. Then after that, we can add the repository, the Mozilla team repository, and do the classical sudo apt install Firefox. And after that, you should have the standard version of Firefox running on your system. So I highly recommend doing this, especially if you're running low on RAM. One last thing, if you want to use the camera, you can actually activate both the front and the back camera. You just need to follow the instructions provided here on this website. Again, it's the information is provided by the GitHub website of the repository we use to install the new kernel, the adapted kernel for the Surface tablets. I'll sum it up briefly. So in Ubuntu, you need to install all the dependencies you need to actually be able to build something from source. There is one thing missing, but I included it in my video description. So you need to install Git first, and then you can follow the other instructions, install the dependencies, move on to the next step and build libcamera from source. This takes about 10 minutes if I remember correctly, so it wasn't difficult at all. It's just a matter of typing in a few terminal commands, and once this is done you can check whether it actually works by using an app such as Cheese. But there's one more step, I almost forgot it. So you need to make sure that your user is part of the video group. It has to do with accounts and permissions, so make sure that everything is correct here. Now there is a restriction. The cameras only work with applications using the GStreamer plugin, but you can also make sure that it turns into a V4L2L loopback device. No, V4L2 loopback device. Sounds difficult. It's a bit involved. I didn't do that because I don't need the cameras, but if you want to do this, you just need to follow the tutorial you can find here, and you'll be absolutely fine. Right, I hope you can enjoy your working Linux tablet from now on. In the next video, we'll have a look at Waydroid. So we want to make sure that we're capable of running Android apps on our new Linux tablet. So see you next time. If you like the channel, you can subscribe and leave me a like. So bye bye, see you next time.